Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome all of our viewers today from Los Angeles, California. We're really thrilled for you to be on this program today. We have three guests from the United Kingdom. Amer Safir from the Review of Religions. We're really thrilled to have him here. Qaasid Muin, who is representing Al-Hakam, and Farhad Ahmad Sahib, who is going to be talking about the International Press Office. Actually, Abdullah Sahib was gracious enough to send a representative, and we're thrilled to be talking about what is a big topic here in the US is why should you read anything? There's so many publications. So what we're talking about today is why should we be reading any of these publications here today?
Massive Spanish population. You know, I realized this. I got off in Miami and they thought I was Latino. They started speaking to me in Spanish, in California and these places. So the Spanish edition, the Spanish edition of Review, Huzur just one day, all of a sudden, he said to us that, look, I want you to think of a Spanish edition now because people think of Spain, but there's 400 million people in Latin America. You now need to develop a plan to do that. And then in Guatemala, Huzur launched it. So all of the things that you see are born out of some vision of Khalifatul Masih. And he's a secret to our success in the progress that you're seeing. And now, from 15,000 8 years ago, through that incremental guidance of Huzur, reaching over 10, 15 million people a year.
Yeah, I think we can go to Tariq, Malik, or Imam Dibba at this point because they are from America, and the feedback that Amer Bhai brought into the discussion, I think we can ask Imam Dibba what he think about it. What's the outcome of all this? I mean, what happened about this publication in America? Is it growing? Do we need more people to subscribe, for example? And that can be addressed.
I thought I was here to ask questions. That's what's up. What is this, man?
Dibba Sahib,
we know you're very good at replying.
Dibba Sahib, you have to mention, because Philly has a very special relationship with Review of Religions. You remember when Huzur came and he mentioned it in his Friday sermon?
I was just about to say that, actually.
Okay.
No, definitely, man. Mr. Visa, I can relate so much with what you're saying. When I was first posted to the US, honestly, man, I was thinking, being in the UK for 8 years, you think, you just drive from one Jamaat to the other mosques everywhere, and then when we get together for soccer and football, we'll just text each other, within half an hour, 20, 30 people will show up and we'll have a great game. And then we'll drive 10 minutes, 5 minutes and get to a place we eat. And then we're like, who can drop this guy off? Who can drop this guy off? Even the young ones will just drop each other home. Before within an hour, we'll all be home. So I was so used to that. And then just coming here, you're talking about your experience traveling around on all these flights. I was so confused, man. It's like a different world altogether. Yeah. When I had one Jamaat that I had to drive, 2.5 hours just to lead prayers. And I'm thinking, man, where have I landed? So the challenges are very, very different. It's just a khadim coming in myself, I had to first understand those struggles.
Where you are, Dibba Sahib, Philly, it's a very special link with Review of Religions, which I had the honor again when Huzur was in America a few years ago, and Faiq Sahib was doing his exterior gate duty, trying to let us into all the gates. But what I'm saying is that we didn't actually know. I remember Majid Dair Sahib, the additional Wakil Tabshir, told us afterwards that Huzur had told him to research, and many people didn't know it. Nobody knew this.
Oh my God.
And Huzur mentioned it in his Friday sermon. So Philadelphia, of course, everyone knows is that if I'm not mistaken, was Declaration of Independence signed in
that's right.
Philadelphia, and the first president lived there. The White House initially was in Philadelphia, and Mufti Sadiq Sahib, that's the first place he came to, Philadelphia. Yeah. So it's very historic, both in a secular way and for the Jamaat. So Huzur mentioned in his khutbah that the first convert in Philadelphia in the history of Jamaat, Dr. Baker, he converted by reading the Review of Religions. And he mentioned this research. And actually,
that's a no
way.
And they found what the local Southern, we interviewed him as well. They found his grave nearby. And actually, I had the honor of being there when Huzur went there to the grave 5 minutes away. And actually, on the grave is written, he converted to Ahmadiyyat through Review of Religions.
Wow.
I
didn't know that.
Huzur especially went there and prayed. So Review of Religions in the early early history, and even, we try to do it now, but they were companions and the Prophet Messiah himself was writing, but he had a big role in spreading the message of Islam Ahmadiyyat to new places. It pioneered, meant like Mauritius. Mauritius is the second oldest Jamaat, foreign Jamaat. The first Ahmadi, many Mauritian people will tell you, and it's in Tariq Ahmadiyyat, history of Ahmadiyyat, the first Ahmadi in Mauritius, he converted Nur Muhammad by reading the Review of Religions. He read the Review of Religions, he found out more, and his whole group converted. there's many countries like this, Nigeria, Ghana, with the early Ahmadis. They learned of Ahmadiyyat. So it was almost like a door. There was no MTA and other, outside external facing mediums. So Review of Religions had an important role in bringing the message of Ahmadiyyat to new places.
I'm just sad that when you mentioned Mauritius, you didn't mention that they speak French as well,
They say they speak Creole.
yeah, that's right. That's what Mauritius Creole, right? If you have one argument then to our Khuddam and to our Khadim for what and why we should subscribe to Review of Religion right now, what it will be?
I think that first of all, I think that everyone should subscribe to all the platforms that are on here today. Qaasid Sab's coming afterwards, and Farhad Sab. That's also a Promised magazine. They're all guided by Khilafat. And I think a lot of times we forget that, like, we have a lot of effect in the world, but there's many people we haven't reached out to. And sometimes people think, why is there so many platforms in this? But if you watch Hazur's virtual mulaqats, he's continuing to encourage even local Jamaats to start new magazines and regional Jamaats to start new magazines. We still have to reach out to so many more people. So the point is, every magazine has its own aims, the Promised or the Khulafa set up. For the Review of Religions, like just recently, again, completely based on Hazur's vision, we started something called the Existence Project. And of course, one of the purposes that Review was set up is to prove the existence of God. And so it's like a fundamental question. Like, a lot of people, even Khuddam, have this question. They could have questions about God, about atheism, about different aspects of God. So if we just take this one issue, this is something that Hazur himself has given a really amazing kind of insight, which we just recently published. And also one quite amazing thing, which hadn't been done before, and it's quite new for us, is that Hazur said, normally when someone has a dream or something, and we don't normally relate it publicly, but Hazur said, I want these personal experiences of acceptance of God to be published on a large scale. So if the promised Messiah alayhi salam said that God speaks today as he did before, then science says that if you have a large quantity of something which is observable or witnessed, then that kind of testifies to its truth. This is how science works. So what if we collated a huge number of these experiences with God? That is that we know that's there and it has been done, but if we do it in a systematic way, that's going to be very powerful. And it's amazing. We're getting a lot of young people who are 13, 14, 15, 16, coming out with stories of the acceptance of prayers. So I feel amongst many other reasons, you have Hazur's speeches, we publish Hazur's letters and to world leaders. There's so many things, but I feel a lot of these issues which are affecting the world today, like I said, mental health, the issue of true love in relationships, the issue of drugs, the issue of alcohol, and so forth. We have a lot of the research, and we have a lot of articles in Review of Religions. And it's not just reading Review of Religions. If you don't like to read, you can watch our videos. If you like to listen, you can listen to the audio platforms. And if you like yourself, you prefer French, you can read our French edition.
So Amer Sahib, one thing I would really like you to highlight here is that I'm a fan myself of the printed version, but with Khuddam here, we all know, people even argue that there's no point even printing stuff now, right? So people argue that. What I like about Review of Religions, man, you're on every platform, YouTube, Instagram. I think that is where Khuddam need to meet you, right? Wherever they are, just to let them know that we are there. If you're following 200 accounts, if Review is one of them, you can get this amazing information.
I think with the print edition thing, I think it's a bit nuanced. Like I was recently, Azur sent me to attend some conferences, and I attended a conference where you had the CEO of Time, National Geographic, all these magazines, Newsweek, and one of them got up and said, look, everyone's been saying it's the death of the print edition, but we're still here in 2020, and there's more print editions now in the shops than before. Of course, things have changed. A lot of people prefer online. You can't survive without online, but print hasn't died. And some people prefer, they presented some, of course, there's no doubt you have to go digital. It would be ridiculous for anyone to suggest otherwise. But they did some research, and they found a worldwide survey amongst youth, and they found that 75% preferred print, but there's reasons why they do online. For example, if you're a university student, it's expensive to buy a lot of printed materials, cheaper to go online. Similarly, you can't fit like 10 books in your bag. You can go. So there's different reasons. But what I want to say, Dibba Sahib, is when I came back from my America tour and mentioned that a lot of people are saying to me about print, it was very interesting. Although Hazur is encouraging so much, everyone, all these platforms here, we're all using digital. Hazur, his take was something very different and spiritual. Everybody was giving me like secular arguments back and forth. And Hazur looked at me and said, of course, print will never die because the Quran says by the ink and by the pen. This verse in the Quran. Hazur said that in sociology, you see that the world turns in a certain direction for 50, 60 years. There's a trend, but you always see them coming back to their roots eventually. And I remember about a week after Hazur said this, Amazon, who have been responsible for decimating the print business of books because of the online selling. So many bookstores have closed. I remember a week after Hazur said this, Amazon announced their first actual physical bookstore in Seattle, and I was able to go attend, see it there. So Amazon, who for 20 years was doing online book selling, suddenly opened a physical bookstore. And they were thinking about opening about 200-300 more all over America. So there's no doubt that digital has to be done. You cannot survive without digital. People prefer it, but also it's not correct to say print has died because there is.
No, I'm sure he hasn't died. Like I said, personally, I prefer print. But just for a 13-year-old here is watching, there's one thing of convincing them that print is still great. But if right now all they have is social media, just for you to let them know that they can find you there, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're on.
That was my point.
Instagram, right? We're on Twitter. We have alhamdulillah, very active YouTube channel for videos as well. So if people prefer that, then by all means, they can attend those. They can go and subscribe to our Instagram, to our Twitter, Facebook as well, and YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the interesting thing was in college, I did a case study, and the case study was why the Economist magazine had maintained its level of print publication. And I think that it was the quality of what was being provided in the first place. And I think that's also indicative of why they've continued to grow as a print publication. They have really expert advice and opinions and what they're doing. And I think the review is the epitome of that as well, right? I mean, we're getting stuff directly from Hazur. And I think, Amer, we talked about this earlier today. Some of the topics are, very relevant to our youth today, right? Yeah. I mean, Hazur is not giving sort of these grandiose answers, which we can't understand. I think you were talking about true love earlier, right? And, some of these other topics.
Hazur addressed like the issue of true love, of course, as I said, in every country, and even in recent virtual mulaqats, everyone knows that this issue raises everywhere about marriage and everything. Hazur addressed it very straight on, but with great wisdom and great insight into the modern context. It's very interesting. For example, Hazur said in this interview that we have this misconception that arranged marriages are all kind of doomed to fail, but actually even now the statistics is that arranged marriages are far more successful than love marriages. Statistics there to prove it. Secondly, Hazur said, as an example, Hazur always kind of puts a mirror up against society and lets them think. So Hazur said, by way of example, that if you look, let's say, for example, that argument's sake, that arranged marriages are not good and Islam is wrong to do it. For argument's sake, if you look at the rates of, and Safir Saab's their lawyer, maybe you could, if you look at the rates of domestic violence in the USA, in the UK, and in Germany, domestic violence between husband and wife, not amongst Muslims, the rate is off the charts. Oh, wow. It's a phenomenal rate of domestic abuse. So what does that tell us about love marriages? So there's so many facades and images that are created in society of what it is. But when Hazur kind of dug deeper, and Hazur even mentioned in it, look at Diana, look at Prince Charles. Hazur mentioned these examples that look, their marriages failed within a year. So what does this mean? Is love marriages are not guaranteed to be successful. Arranged marriage doesn't mean forced marriage, obviously, and there's ways to arrange it. So yeah, it's amazing the way Hazur answered those questions to contemporary issues, and it's worth reading these.
Yeah, so I think it's very important for our youth. Sometimes they said, we want to have love marriage. We cannot love each other when it's arranged. So it's very important topics that you're touching here, Amer Sahib. Jazakumullah. We're gonna pass the mic maybe to Qaasid Sahib, right? He's representing Al-Hakam today. And Al-Hakam, yesterday, we were talking about it even before the program. As we asked for a couple of people, did you download the application for Al-Hakam?
Nobody had it.
Nobody had it. And they were like, but what is this? Another publication of our Jamaat and all that. But I noticed, back in the days when before pandemic, right? I used to have, I had an office mulaqat with Hazur, and I remember right before this office mulaqat, the one person who go give the entire bunch of newspaper to Hazur, in which there is Urdu newspaper. We'll come back to that with Farhad Sahib, but there were Al-Hakam on the top. So what is Al-Hakam? is it from the back in the time of a Promised Messiah as well, or is it has been launched through the Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis? This is something that is interesting to know. And how are you going to advocate for this, Qaasid bhai?
So Al-Hakam is a newspaper which was launched primarily initially in the time of the Promised Messiah Islam in 1897. It was the first actual organ of the Jamaat. There was no representation, there was no MTA, there was no review of religions, there was no Badr, there was nothing. And so Al-Hakam appears, and that was the very first thing that had that united the entire community at the time of the Promised Messiah in 1897, 6th of October to be precise. And it was a very devoted young companion, Hazrat Sheikh Yaqub Ali Irfani Sahib, who was a journalist by profession. And he felt that all Ahmadis around the world who were performing Bai'at and joining the community, they needed to be unified by a regular, an organ, a newspaper, by which they could be informed about what was going on in the Markaz, what was happening in Qadian, what revelations were being received by the Promised Messiah from God Almighty. So everything you see in Tazkirah as revelations, most of that was included in Malfuzat. And in fact, the pioneering missionary at the time, the pioneering missionary of the United States of America, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, I'm not sure if many Khuddam knows this, but he was actually the first private secretary of the Jamaat. So he was the first private secretary to the Promised Messiah Islam. And he would receive a note from the Promised Messiah that, today I've received this revelation. And he would then pass that on to Al-Hakam, and then later on Badr as well, which was a newspaper. So this is a little bit of a history of that. And then the sayings of the Promised Messiah, Malfuzat, the sayings of the Promised Messiah that have been compiled, which were mostly said in sittings with the Promised Messiah, or on walks when the Promised Messiah would take his, regular excursion outside of the town with his companions, with maybe a guest. Those were recorded. There were scribes at the time who would note down everything very quickly, and then they would note it down and then have it published in Al-Hakam. So these things were being published. Then there were, addresses later on in the time of Hazrat Muslim, the second Khalifa. You had his addresses, his sermons, his speeches, which were being published. And then obviously Al-Fazl came along, and Al-Hakam ceased to exist due to primarily financial constraints, because Al-Fazl existed, which was obviously launched by Hazrat Muslim himself before Khilafat in 1913, I believe. And so Al-Hakam ceased to exist for primarily financial reasons. There may have been other reasons, I'm not too sure of that. It came and went. In 1934, I believe, it continued again. It stopped in the 1920s, I believe it was 1920. 1934, you see it pop up again, and then in 1950s, that was its final end. Now, in 2018, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V launched this newspaper, which is Al-Hakam. Al-Hakam basically means, it's an Arabic word, and it's actually interesting that we chose that an Arabic word was chosen for an English newspaper. That seems like a bit of a paradox. So I'll come to that as well. Al-Hakam is an attribute of God Almighty, but it's also one of the names given to the Promised Messiah, the judge. He would be the judge between the decision maker between good and bad. That was something which the Holy Prophet foretold in his time, that when the Messiah comes, he would perform this job. Now, in 2018, we were commissioned with this task of starting a newspaper, and primarily we were initially in the archive and research department. We had a lot of archives which were stored on shelves, and they weren't getting out there. They weren't being shared with the Jamaat. There was a lot of stories. There was a lot of rich history of the Jamaat that was not getting there to the especially English speaking people. Now, unfortunately, the trend of the Jamaat's history, or knowledge of the Jamaat's history, primarily Urdu-speaking people are more informed about what the Jamaat stands for, or what Jamaat's history, because primarily the Jamaat's history has been in Pakistan, and a lot of, most of it's been there, and only a portion of it we see in the West, when after 1984, when Hazur came to London, and even that we see a fraction of that, because we don't see the administrative side. We see, we hear his Friday sermons, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of history which the Jamaat has preserved. There's a rich legacy which the Jamaat has left behind. For instance, in the form, America celebrates Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib. I can tell you there were hundreds of missionaries like that after him, of course, because, you know, that was a time when the missionary organization had just boomed. But after him, there have been so many missionaries like him who, you know, pioneered in various countries, and they started Jamaats in their respective locations. So there is a rich history. Now, coming to the name of Al-Hakam, why choose this? The reason is Al-Hakam is primarily aimed at Ahmadi readership. It is not necessarily, I don't want to say it is not at all for external readership, but the aim, because you have to have an aim, you have to have an ethos that you live by. Our ethos is target the Ahmadi youth, you know, get them to read this. Because the thing is, I, being born and raised here in the UK, I have nothing to do with, you know, Pakistan as such. You know, I've been there maybe a couple of times, and that is where obviously the Jamaat's history is. And then before that, we have Qadian. I did not speak very good Urdu before I went to Jamia. But during my time in Jamia, and after that, under Hazur's guidance, you know, being given various tasks, I actually was assigned with Amer's Safir Sahib to do a translation work as well. So I've had the good fortune of working with him very closely. So after that, I got to learn a lot about the Jamaat's history, about the Jamaat's legacy, about what we are, what we stand for. At first, sometimes a lot of people think that the Jamaat perhaps is a relief organization, that we're a charity organization only. And that we just provide relief. We just go out to, you know, disaster-stricken areas and we go and help people in earthquakes. That is good. That is, you know, it's a very good deed. It's a noble cause. But that is not primarily what we're here for. And as a Muslim, I was actually in one place to actually address this, that no, this is not our task. Our task is much more than this. It's spiritual alleviation. It's spiritual healing. And we have the answer to these things. If we believe this, then, you know, surely there must be answers there. So what we do in Al-Hakam is try and touch base, try and take it back to the basics. Who are we as an Ahmadiyya? What is the Ahmadiyya community? You know, in the midst of a religion, which is already so notoriously known, unfortunately, around the world, Islam. In the midst of that, we're a notorious group of Ahmadis. So we're the most hated of hated people, right? We you know, everyone's, you know, we've been cornered. We need to realize our identity. We need to know who we are. Our narrative has to be strong. Newspapers play a very crucial role in the collective psyche of a nation. Newspapers can form and they represent the collective psyche of a nation. So that is sort of what Al-Hakam is all about. And I mean, you know, taking the discussion further, we can obviously...
you know, you mentioned about Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sarwatalanhu, right? Before he even became private secretary. So for those who don't know, you know, he when he was very young, he was actually going to college in Lahore. He would make sure that any weekend that came, instead of going home spending time with his family, so this is how his journey started. Any weekend, any holidays, he would pay for a train from Lahore and he would go to Qadian. And he would spend his entire time around the Prophet ﷺ. He'd have papers, blank papers and a pen, ink, whatever. And he would write down all the important things that happened during the weekend. This was before any kind of newspaper thing started. And then when he went back to Lahore, not only in his college, but the whole Lahore Jamaat, whenever he had a little bit of time, he would go around, he would sit people around, and he would tell them what's happening in Qadian. So he was kind of running his own show, right? So but what the question I was going to ask you is, just to kind of, he was a young man, he was going to college. And, you know, when people see you, they may think, okay, some guy who is a murabbi and he's working for this, you know, newspaper in London. So just to kind of close that gap, right? If a youngster is watching right now, how can they see themselves in, you know, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib was a young man who was just doing this. Nobody told him to do that job, right? He just felt that the message of Prophet needed to reach people in Lahore, and he started it. Or you yourself, you dedicated your life, and now, you know, you're doing this. So how do you link that to just a young person who is, you know, watching, or what they can really do as far as participation or whatever?
So I think, so if I understood your question correctly, what you're basically asking what the youth can, you know, how can the youth familiarize themselves with
because
the
I want to
characters
even
that we
ask
read
more.
about?
Yeah, I want to just ask more, right? Because sometimes we set the bar a little low, right? Just just read a newspaper. But just to go a bit further, right? There are people printing that newspaper. There are people's involvement and all that stuff. What kind of drives you? And just to understand that will kind of also hopefully drive people to just respect and know what you're doing.
I think what pushes me to want to do more is that, so a newspaper can have one of two things. It can have two things, basically. It can have It can have both things. It can have news, obviously. That's the primary purpose of a newspaper, to convey news. So what we have is, we have from the Markaz, we have a specific segment which is called From the Markaz. We cover the reports in as much detail as possible of Hazur's engagements, weekly engagements, daily engagements, what is happening. Aside from that, we have news from all around the world. The idea is to have one area where all the efforts of the Jamaat, and we're working towards this, obviously it's a work in progress. All countries of the world, the idea is to have every single event that's being covered in every single country around the world as part of Al-Hakam. That will help. Yeah. That will help informing the Tariq Ahmadiyyat as we are living it. We're writing the history of the Jamaat as we're living it. That's one purpose. And in that purpose, I should mention, just in brackets, if you may allow me, we had a historian who worked very closely with us in the Archive and Research Center, Ronald Jeeves, and he's a leading authority in Islam in Britain. And he came in touch with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and he found out through our department that the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, in fact, had the first mosque in London, and it wasn't the East London Mosque, against popular belief. And so he realized that not just a chapter was missing, but a whole book was missing from the history of Islam in Britain. And he dedicated many years to trying to cover this issue. The first thing we learned from this is other people are writing about us. Why aren't we taking as much interest or as much effort into understanding who we are? I can tell you one thing. Ronald Jeeves, he spent, I believe, 3 or 4 years studying the Ahmadiyya Jamaat. And this is not just, one person who's done it. I'm sure Amer will agree. There are many researchers out there, even as we speak, who are dedicating their time to studying the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat outside of the Jamaat. We need to know more than they do. But I can truly say that a lot of them probably know a lot more than me, about the history of the Jamaat. So Ronald Jeeves, whilst he was researching, he wrote the book, about the Fazl Mosque being the first mosque in Britain. And I realized that his biggest struggle was with Urdu, because everything was in Urdu. Everything was being written. And so we had to translate everything. I spent many weeks, literally from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Literally, we'd take a half an hour lunch break, and I was reading him out extracts that he had found in Rabwa on his trip. And I was reading out stuff from the time of Hazrat Mufti Sahib in the UK, from Hazrat Maulana Abdurrahim Nair Sahib in the UK, reading out long passages, translating them in English. And I realized that this is something which needs to be done for the long run in English. This is something, and eventually, Al-Hakam came into shape, and this is something, it's a work in progress. We're working towards it. But hopefully Al-Hakam can serve as a platform for, say, in 100 years' time, or even 50 years' time, 20 years' time, when a historian wants to write on the history of the Jamaat in the United Kingdom, at this point, not just in the United Kingdom, around the world, in 2018, 19, 20, 21, they will have that, a weekly periodical coming out every single week, covering as much as possible around the world. That's news. Aside from news, we have articles, many articles, which are on the history of the Jamaat, on the history of Islam. And this is just 2 subjects. We have current affairs as well. We have, during the lockdown period, I'm sure many of you will remember, Hazur actually mentioned that, Al-Hakam is publishing these articles of what people are doing during the lockdown period. And many people, mothers especially, they wrote about their struggles with lockdown, having to deal with everyone at home, because mothers, Ahmadi mothers, were used to having the home free. The guy's gone to work, kids are at school, but all of a sudden, this massive burden is on mothers to cater for their children and, cook for them, clean them. And then, even the husbands are struggling as well in terms of helping out at home, not knowing what to do. So there was a lot going on in the lockdown period. And even today, current affairs are being covered. So it's not just news. There is a lot that can be contributed. We have Jamia students writing from Canada as well, from the UK, on current affairs, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day. Yeah, the sky's the limit. With Al-Hakam, the sky's the limit. You got 52 issues every single year.
So actually, Qaasid, we started here in LA. We're far from Markaz. Even in the US, right? Like in LA, we have Markaz in Silver Spring, Maryland, right? And we even have a West Coast Jalsa because a lot of people historically aren't able to go to the East Coast Jalsa, right? So that's how far we are from Markaz. And I think that what we did here was even just started Dars series weekly, where we do a Dars on invitation to Ahmadiyyat. And the main reason for that was just identifying ourselves and knowing what identifies us as Ahmadis. right? A lot of youth here, like, I was telling a story to somebody about Amer was talking about when Hazur was here, and I was working with Hifazat Khas, and I was telling the story, and then the kid goes, "What is Hifazat Khas?" Right? He doesn't know what those things are, right? And so what we're trying to figure out is, I think a lot of the kids here, especially in the US or just generally who are far from Markaz, are not familiar with, as you said, Tariq Ahmadiyyat and all of these things. So, I mean, this goes back to the topic of why we're here. Like, why should people, what's the appeal? Like, how can I go and say, listen, go read Al-Hakam? You're going to gain something from that. Like, how can I approach that?
So there's a couple of things in that. So, for instance, parents are taught from the very childhood, that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the promised Messiah and Mehdi. If someone doesn't know who the promised Messiah is, then obviously Al-Hakam will, we have to meet halfway. So Al-Hakam has to bear in mind the standard that was being kept in the time of the promised Messiah Islam as the first newspaper. Al-Hakam was actually described by the promised Messiah as one of his arms. He said, "Ye mere do baazon mein se ek baat, mere do baazon, Al-Hakam and Badr. These are my two aids. They're doing a lot of work for me. They on a weekly basis, covering articles, writing articles, research-based articles, and this is something that we're trying to emulate today for the English reader. Al-Hakam is so. Are you talking about terms? How can we relate to terms? Is that what you're asking, for example?
No, I mean, I think what I'm trying to figure out, right? Like, I mean, I'm the local guide here, right? And I would love for people to read the Al-Hakam, right? I'd love for them to do that. And I'm struggling with, they are, struggling with themselves to identify as a Muslim, as an Ahmadi. And it's not that they're not interested. It's not that they don't care. It's just that they're trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to help them understand that this is a source that they can go to really sort of get plugged in. But I'm just struggling to figure out how I can pitch that.
I totally see what you mean. And you know what? I can actually appreciate the struggle of these youngsters, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm the biggest bookworm. I'm not. I struggle to read myself. I've always struggled to read. I can actually, hands down say I was probably one of the poorest students in my school. And even after that, I won't say where I went after that, but you get the gist. I wasn't exactly the most studious of students. But having said that, I wasn't studious, but I'd pick up a paper maybe every now and then, pick up a book and just read the blurb, read the back of a book, maybe flick a few pages, look at the pictures, and just, little by little, gradually. The thing is, Al-Hakam is a weekly paper, and inshallah, it's going to continue. So,
inshallah.
I would obviously, as the editor of Al-Hakam, say, yes, you should read every single page. I know how unrealistic that may be for the modern youngster, for the modern youth.
Right.
Al-Hakam is a paper that's coming out every single week. Just pick it up. Just flick through it. We've got an app. It's on Apple and Android. We've got a website, alhakam.org. You can subscribe via subscription. Subscribe at alhakam.org. You can email us, and for just £12, which what would that equate to in dollars? You've got to help me out there.
I mean, about $15 to $16 maybe, and we'll put all the link under the video. I think we'll put all the links under the video when we'll be up to.
We'll also put the exchange rate as well.
Yeah. So there you go. We'll be sending it to you from here. We'll be sending you the print issue. Just pick it up, have a look, read through it. Just read Hazur's Hazur's reports, Hazur's engagements of the week. Maybe an article or two.
Sure.
There is some interesting stuff in there for everyone. I guarantee it.
For sure.
Give it a try. Don't knock it. In English, in here in Britain, we say don't knock it until you've tried it. So don't give up. Keep going. I totally agree. Identity is the biggest challenge today for anyone. We all have so many different role models, on Instagram, on social media, Twitter, YouTube, on television, reality television. You've got the trends of music to keep up with. You've got movies. You've got these figures, celebrities. You've got you've got a plethora. You've got an array of video games.
Everyone's trying to sell something to you. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So
you know what?
Everyone is, man.
One day.
By the way, Faiq is in marketing and then all that YouTube, Google stuff. He can tell you
100%, man. So whichever one of you guys come, whoever's the highest bidder at this point, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Just help. I got you. You know what I mean?
That's what it is.
We'll take it.
And you talked about the youth, right? Because it's
Yeah,
and I like that part because, I mean, I understand fully. I deal with Khuddam as well in all these different 3 Jamaats that I'm in. We can have a meeting right now. It can be the most motivating one. It can be like, yeah, I'm going to go read all this stuff. It takes one Instagram notification from a celebrity you're following and you're distracted. It takes one text message from your colleague in school and it's gone out of the window, right? It's so difficult, right? Or, Review of Religions is trying to tell you about, hey, read this article of a Jamia student who had an amazing experience with Hazur. You look at it, it's like, 15 lines, 16 lines. Someone else give you a 15-second TikTok. Who's going to win? It's a tug of war, and it's not going to be easy, right? So for everyone, sometimes you want to watch a movie, someone tells you they recommend this amazing movie for you. First 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're like, man, this is boring. But you want to get to the interesting part. But you have to sit there and go through the first 10 minutes of the boring part, and then it hits, right? So I like the fact that, at the end of the day, you're going to have to pick up that newspaper or that app. You're going to have to download it and give it a shot. I don't think anyone's going to be here to convince you, and then you're going to love it and be like, that's it. From now on, Al-Hakam. It's not that. The reality is you have to give it a try, man.
Exactly. And you know what? I was talking about identity. One day it's one role model. The next day it's the other. You'll be emulating one person, and then the next day you'll be copying another, and the next week you'll be copying another. But the thing is, if you really want to look at an area where you can be a trendsetter rather than a follower, because the thing is, what's fashionable now is to be a trendsetter. If you can set a trend, I think that will make you more popular. I believe Mufti Sadiq Sahib, characters like Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, characters like Maulana Abdul Rahim Dard Sahib, characters like Maulana Abdul Rahim Nair Sahib, I believe that these characters are strong characters, strong role models. And we are covering that. Al-Hakam has a section which is called 100 Years Ago. In that 100 Years Ago section, each week we're giving a snippet from an organ, Al-Fazl, even Review of Religions, even Al-Hakam, from 100 years ago. So today, if it's, I'm going to have to check the date, 14th of March, 2021, we'll go back to 14th March, 1921, and tell you that Hazrat Maulana Abdul Rahim Nair Sahib has just arrived in Sierra Leone. And this has happened only a few weeks ago. If you go 100 years back, he actually just arrived in Sierra Leone. Mufti Sahib, we covered his arrival in the United States of America. And even now, if the youth in America want to know about Mufti Sahib's regular updates that he was giving from the United States and writing back to Al-Hakam, writing back to Al-Fazl, because he was, I guarantee you, Mufti Sahib has actually written that I am a strong proponent of Al-Hakam. And he's written reports where he's praised Al-Hakam, the work that they did at the time of the Promised Messiah, in being one of the arms of the Promised Messiah. So these identities, I feel that they are true role models in their complete and utter obedience, but at the same time, their mentality, in that they didn't just sit idly, but they actually did something about it. They used that passion that they got, the drive that they got from Khalifa al-Masih, and they said, you know what? I'm not going to be like the nation of Moses that said, you and your God go and fight. Exactly. I am going to go and fight for you. And that is exactly what Hazur has done for us. Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih V has said, you go. And you know what? Hazur, constantly in my mulaqats, one thing that I've noticed on a number of occasions is that Hazur actually is a big proponent of freedom of press, freedom of media. When I go and ask for guidance, I say, Hazur, should we do it like this? Should we do it like this? I wait for Hazur's guidance. And you know what Hazur says? Hazur says, Tum editor, you're the editor. You decide. Go and do this. As long as it's not against the teachings of Islam, as long as it's not against the teachings of the Jamaat, Hazur says, go. Find out. Go and have a look. So, and I learned that Hazur is a big proponent of freedom of press, which is, currently nowadays. I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but there is a lot of, it's come under the limelight. The freedom of press.
Let's go to Farhad Sahib, right? You give us a very nice transition. We don't have to do that work too, with Qaasid. Look, this is the MTA thing, right? He's so much on MTA with Beacon of Truth. You can recognize his face that you're like, oh wow, such a nice transition. So let's go to Farhad Sahib. Jazakumullah Qaasid for all your insight about Al-Hakam. I think I did not subscribe to the written version, but I will inshallah subscribe to it right after this meeting, inshallah. inshallah. And of course, we'll enjoin everybody to do the same. I mean, he pleaded his case pretty well.
I think so.
We have to say that. and he was the guy who was like, oh no, I don't know if I will be able to talk 20 minutes, but mashallah,
can I just add one thing?
He wants more
Just
time.
one more thing. And you know what? It may appear.
You want to add something
right
even?
Yeah, go ahead.
It may appear as if I'm trying to fight my corner, but let me tell you truthfully, the banner I read, which was promoting this event right now, it said, which one should I read? And you know what? It's not about which one should you read. It's all of them. You should be reading all of them. The fact is that the competition between, for instance, Amer Saab's here, and he represents Review of Religions. I'm here representing Al-Hakam. If this was a worldly organization, we'll be competing with one another. But the fact is that we are not each other's competition. The competition right now is A, the growing trend of irreligiousness and atheism, and B, the growing trend of illiteracy and not wanting to know more, not wanting to be able to read. So these two things are what primarily we are all trying to tackle. And, we need your support as Ahmadi youngsters. You are the future. I think we need your support in helping us achieve this.
Yeah, and Jazakallah, we really appreciate the context. And obviously here in the US, everyone's competing for the front page, right? They're always trying to figure out, what news is going to break and how can we get to the front page. That kind of transitions us to Farhad Bhai. I was thinking to myself, Hazur is probably inundated with data and information, and how he is able to kind of synthesize all of that information and data. I'd be really curious to hear from you, Farhad Bhai. Welcome to the program, and please give us a little bit of a background on.
Just before you ask one thing to Farhad. Farhad Bhai, I would like to know: is Hazur a defendant of freedom of press, as Qaasid Sahib mentioned it?
I think there's definitely no doubt. I mean, Qaasid Sahib really highlighted how it is. And the fact that there's so many media outlets, we were talking about how there's a boom of media outlets within the Jamaat. That just shows how much emphasis, and every media outlet that you go to, you realize that Hazur is the driving force behind it. Like, for instance, even the Voice of Islam radio here in the UK, that's one media outlet, which I remember that we were, I had to present on that a few times in the morning, and that show used to start in the morning at 6:30 a.m. And that was very, very early on in the morning. And a couple of times over the time, because it was right in the beginning, the show used to start a bit late. So one day we got a notification from Muin, and he said that Hazur had mentioned that the show sometimes starts late, and Hazur listens to the Voice of Islam radio in the morning when Hazur is exercising or doing something else. So it just shows how Hazur is himself, he's got so much to do, but Hazur spends time on Jamaat platforms in terms of listening to them and nurturing them and developing them over time. So it's really
amazing. I don't even know how he has the time.
And I think, earlier Qaasid Sahib was talking about the fact of, about identity. And Hazur really leads the way in terms of, because, to develop a certain identity, you need to have ownership of certain things. You need to know that this is, if you have your parents, you do something for them, you make an effort for them, and you know that they're your parents. There's a sense of ownership, there's a sense of belonging. And that is exactly what we see, that, Hazur is reading. Like, for instance, I remember a lot of the times Hazur would mention to Jamia students that, do you read Al-Fazl? At that time, Al-Hakam wasn't there, and Review of Religions was emphasized as well by Hazur, but Hazur would, some of the Jamia students I spoke to, Hazur asked, do you read Al-Fazl or not regularly? And it just shows, like, Hazur mentioned that he himself reads it as well, and Hazur picks out things from there. So it just means that, like, if Hazur is there and he's owning these Jamaat outlets in the sense that he's reading them and he's encouraging us to become involved with them, it just means that, look, we need to take, like, for instance, I was just reading a fact even today that there's about 6 hours a day a child is spending on the internet nowadays, or on screens. That's a lot of time. It's increased exponentially in the lockdown period. 6 hours of our time, and that's for children, being spent on screens, which means that we need to ask ourselves, like, how much of that time are we spending on something which is a Jamaat platform, which is something that we own, which is something which is our platform. I think we shouldn't recognize Al-Hakam, Review, other Jamaat platforms as something which is another platform. It's our own platforms. It's something that we own. it's part of us, it's part of our identity. So it's so in that way, it's really good that you're hosting this as well.
Yeah, Farhad bhai, what about, I remember that, and I heard for sure that Hazur, after, I think it's from Abid bhai, right? Abid bhai's diary, but I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote or anything, but sometimes the Abid bhai go to meet Hazur. Hazur already know the news and all that, and Hazur often say to Abid bhai, you're not bringing any new news for me. So what is basically how Hazur, is there any about secular, I'm talking about secular newspaper right now. Is there any secular newspaper that Hazur particularly will watch or will look after some analysis? Is there something like this?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like in the diaries, if you read them, and whenever you read them, you come across so many incidents of the fact that Hazur, like for instance, there's this incident from the Canada trip in 2016 where Hazur called over Abid Khan Sahib, and Hazur showed his iPad to Abid Sahib, and he started going through some of the latest news stories on some of the news apps that Hazur had on his iPad. Wow. And Hazur, some of the Abid Sahib mentioned that some of the news items at that time were quite weird, and Hazur read them and he laughed and he smiled, and Hazur actually asked Abid Sahib on that occasion that, are you up to date with the news? And Abid Sahib mentioned that he hadn't read the news for a couple of hours. So Hazur then started reading the news stories, and at that time even there was a story about Prince Harry complaining about press intrusion into his private life, which obviously is a very current story now as well, and it's developed over time. But then there's there's so many other things as well. Like for instance, it's not only that Hazur, obviously our press office is there that has a responsibility and of preparing news briefings, and that's something that we have the honor and blessing that we prepare, and Abid Sahib presents those to Hazur on a regular basis. But for anyone to think that Hazur relies on solely us, or Hazur, we're the providers of news to Hazur, that's completely not true. Hazur himself actually guides us towards which news stories to look for and what stories to read. For instance, Hazur doesn't only read the news as well. There's so many magazines that Hazur proactively reads and he goes through. And for instance, I remember that in 2015, when I just joined the press office, at that time we got given an edition of Foreign Affairs magazine, which is, for those that are familiar with it, it's a very dense and very heavy magazine which talks about foreign affairs issues and politics, and also what's going on with regards to foreign policy in different countries. And that was and Hazur sent an edition which was August 2014. And if anyone wants to read, obviously, that I'd really highly recommend. And the main subject that was covered in there was the role of the CIA that they played in the Iranian coup in 1953, and then events in Congo in 1967, Pakistan in 1971, and it just showed how things are working and how the world works. And Hazur sent that through the hands of Abid Sahib for us to read, who are who are the staff members of the press office, and it was really eye-opening reading that. And then I remember that I went to a mulaqat about a year after that, and in that Hazur mentioned that, and Hazur asked, "Have you read that magazine?" which Hazur had sent about a year ago. So, which was really, I was taken aback about the fact that how, Hazur wants, not just Hazur is aware of what's happening in the news, but he wants the Jamaat members, us as Khuddam, to really read the news and understand sort of what's going on. So, Hazur, and that's why we see that, Hazur's knowledge about the secular world as well is so vast that I couldn't imagine it when I joined the press office. I actually had a blessing that once I was able to attend a mulaqat of Hazur with a professor from a London university who was a head of the department of philosophy. And in that, I was just, the professor actually had written a book about oil and how there's corruption, etc., in different parts of the world around the oil industry. And Hazur spoke to him about his subject at that time. And Hazur went into so much detail and named some places and individuals that I'd never heard of. And I could imagine, I could tell actually that the professor himself, he was taken aback by the information that Hazur had. And Hazur asked him a couple of questions and mentioned a few facts that the professor didn't know about. So, so it just shows how
that actually Farhad Bhai happened to me as well when Hazur came to Paris. And I was in a mulakat with the deputy minister, actually. In fact, he was a very knowledgeable guy, right? And he sat down in front of Hazur, and there were Abid Sahib was present as well at that time. And he started talking about, where our masjid in France is located, Masjid Mubarak. And Hazur starts saying, oh, you have this type of agricultural area. What about this side of your town? What about this? And even the deputy minister, he said himself, he said, I don't have so much deep knowledge of this, even though this town is under my jurisdiction. So I totally agree on the fact that sometimes Hazur has so much knowledge about one town or where he goes or when he that's crazy. Also, Farhad Bhai, as your missionary, right? Did Hazur also instructed missionary, right, to have a particular secular knowledge, right? To read newspaper. What about that?
I think definitely Hazur has, on a number of occasions mentioned that missionaries should read the news and understand what's happening. For instance, a couple of times, different Rabbiyan or Jami students have asked Hazur about a particular political issue, and Hazur has said that you should yourselves know what these issues are and you should read them. And in fact, it's to such a degree that I remember that when I in the early days of Gulshan Vakfino, when we had the opportunity to attend some of these, had the blessing of being in Hazur's company as children. I was probably 12 or 13 at that time, and Hazur back then mentioned, I did a presentation on something, and Hazur asked something and I didn't know. And Hazur at that time said that you should increase your religious, your general knowledge, and you should read the news. And who could tell that one day I would be having that honor, that I would be a part of the team that's making news briefings that might get presented to Hazur every now and then. So it was amazing, and it not just showed that, but it showed that even for a 12 or 13-year-old tifl at that time, Hazur was interested in that person, that Hazur wanted that person to develop and gain a secular knowledge as well. And it was, we've seen on so many occasions, for instance, that Hazur himself during the speeches narrates incidents or news stories to make a point about the truth of Islam, to make a point about the beauty of Islam. I remember, for instance, in Germany in 2018, Hazur spoke about the rights of women in the women's speech, and it was like the Review of Religions. They have all of these transcripts on their website for us to read. But there was one fact Hazur mentioned about how women were suffering 4 times more mental stress as compared to men just by having to travel to work. And Hazur mentioned how Islam, when it does mention that there is differences between men and women, they need to be kept in mind. Then Hazur brought that up, and Hazur, supported Islam's teachings from a secular news story point of view as well. So Hazur not only, I've noticed one thing is that not only should we read the news, but also look at it from the perspective that we should be able to defend Islam through what we're reading, and having that at the back of our mind all the time, so that at the end of the day, knowledge. The Promised Messiah ﷺ said that knowledge is power. So gaining that knowledge for the right kind of power to utilize to defend Islam, I think that's something that Hazur leads by example in.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah. That's really helpful. Actually, I wanted to open it up a little bit to our audience to see if they had any
for
questions.
Question and answer. Qaid Sahib, what about Tariq Malik Sahib, if he's online?
Yeah, Tariq,
if he can just promote it a little bit, for his review of religion, and maybe tell persons where to reach out to him if they need to subscribe, or however. I don't know how we subscribe to review of religion.
And also, we gotta, if you don't know who Tariq Malik is, he's the guy who went around the U.S. with a big beard and had a big sign, so Amer was talking about him earlier. He's here actually on the call right now. Assalamu alaikum, Tariq Bhai. How are you?
The beard has gone smaller now.
Yeah, I see that. Tariq Bhai, you're muted by the way.
Yeah.
Jazakallah for having us all on here. The one thing I was just actually messaging you, Faiq Bhai and Arif Bhai, that one thing I really love about the Markaz presentations, that everybody working there, you can literally see the blessing of Hazur's training in their conduct and also in their presentations. And that's what I love about those presentations. So in terms of review of religions, mashallah, is very, very well covered. In terms of subscriptions, I would like to give everybody this good news that mashallah, the USA Jamaat, we were able to exceed the target that Hazur has assigned for us this year. And it was 1,000 subscriptions. We are on that now, alhamdulillah. You can subscribe to the Review of Religions with the subscription link I've shared. It'll take you to a web page which shows you step-by-step procedure to subscribe to the Chanda through the Chanda web portal. So the Review of Religions, you can access it, you can subscribe to it from the Chanda portal. The web page that I've shared will take you and share all the step-by-step procedure on how to do that from the Chanda portal. In terms of subscriptions, please do subscribe for yourself, for your household. And secondly, the Review of Religions it was started for the main purpose of converting, or the sun shall rise from the west. That was the promised Messiah. He saw that vision. It's a prophecy of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. So it's basically to convert others, show people the true teachings of Islam, the beautiful message of Islam. And that's why the promised Messiah, he would write in Urdu and his articles were translated. So unless we ourselves are not reading it, we won't be convinced enough to share it with others. So once we know what's in it, right? The promised Messiah waged the jihad of the pen. So this is not the time for jihad of the sword. Promised Messiah has waged the jihad of the pen. And by that, he wrote so many books. Now, these beautiful publications, Al-Hakam, the Review of Religions, and all the other publications, these are there for us to understand those writings better. And that's the ultimate goal, for us to read those writings as well. However, these are also like perfectly put together under the guidance of Hazur and his prayers, that we can just give it to somebody, and who knows, maybe that will, because I do know a few brothers who converted to Islam Ahmadiyyat by reading the Review of Religions. I know them personally. So please do not underestimate the power of these publications, especially for the external audience. You can gift a subscription. So it's only $30 for a regular subscription. And then there's only $10 for Hazur. Hazur has actually said that students, anybody who's a student, they get it for $10 for the entire year.
That's amazing for Khadams.
Really yeah.
$10, that's like 2 Big Mac meals. Maybe. Even more.
Yeah.
But I love it.
The craziest Chick-fil-A now, Tariq. They're over the Big Macs now.
Chick-fil-A, yes. Or at least there's obviously there's the war between LA and Houston burger spots, right? We know that. But anyways, you can also gift a subscription. And if your friend is a student, you can still just pay $10 and gift it for them. For those who are interested, there's also a $75 3-year subscription. If you don't want to deal with the recurrent payments, just pay it for 3 years. But that's about it. But Jazakallah for this wonderful program. I'm so looking forward to the questions as well.
No, we really appreciate it.
So I hope Amer Safir Sahib is happy with the presentation. I just wanted to notice that. He was saying yes with his head, so I think he's happy with it.
Tariq Sahib's always on point, alhamdulillah.
The boss is happy.
Tariq Sahib gave an amazing presentation, but I think I know he didn't mean it, but he's saying that like it's to make people convert. But recently, we published something of Hazur's where he gave a really insightful answer to some questions, and he said that, and he was kind of telling me, but to everybody, he's saying, look, you guys think that you're going to make people convert, but you have to remember it's not your role to make people convert, because even Allah the Almighty told the Holy Prophet ﷺ that you will not make people convert. You only have to convey the message, and it's up to Allah to change people's heart. I know Tariq Sahib didn't mean that; he just meant the tabligh, but just because people are here listening, that our aim is to convey a message, and we leave it to Allah the Almighty that if He's going to change the person's heart or not.
Jazakallah. That being said, we can open up.
Yeah, let's open it up. You can. I think you can raise your hand, or you can get unmuted if you want to speak. You can also put something in the chat right now as well. I know some people already
try to keep it with the subject as well. I mean, it's about publications for our Jamaat, so we're not with the. I mean, we have missionaries if there is a technical question, but try to keep it with within the publications of our Jamaat, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't get somebody for Al-Fazl. But we were thinking about it, but Al-Fazl is a little bit in Urdu, so it's a little bit more complicated for every youth to get through. Yeah, exactly. So we didn't forget Al-Fazl. That's what.
Absolutely. Also, we're starting this program really to provide transparency, clarity, guidance, context. Really debunk a lot of the notions of what people might have in terms of what the Jamaat's all about, or what Hazur might be saying, or it's too over their heads, or maybe too complicated. If you have any feedback or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you as well. If this is something that you really like, we'd be thrilled to hear from you as well.
Yeah, because when we sit down for this, sorry,
yes.
go ahead.
Sorry, my question is, we've been talking for over an hour now, but we can't see our audience. So who does our audience entail? What sort of people are we talking to?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I can't see like the Google Analytics behind this, right? I mean,
no. I mean, just generally, who should we have in mind when we're answering questions?
Yeah. I mean, the program is really intended for, I would say, really genuinely anybody who's interested in Jamaat.
Yeah.
People who are maybe not familiar with Nizam-e-Jamaat, or it's meant for all members, right?
I see.
But I don't want to segment anybody who, age-wise or anything like that. So it's really meant for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if
is there any questions?
If we have any questions or comments, we'd love to have you come and share your thoughts here. We have 2 hands raised. So let's see here. Hand raised. Salam. Bhatti, I think I'm trying to unmute him. Don't know how exactly.
Right, so I think he should be able to unmute himself.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Salam. Yeah, can hear you. Salam bhai. Salam alaikum.
Hey, welcome everybody. This was such a great session. Jazakallah for hosting this. I just want to say that Jazakallah to Tariq bhai's efforts. He was very persistent in trying to get people to sign up for review of religions, and I was on the receiving end for a few months of that tabligh, I would say. And I never subscribed because I was always thinking, I don't have time to read another Jamaat publication. But then, he ultimately convinced our family, and not only did we start receiving review of religions, and I found out I have time to read it, but my son is loving it. He's only 2 years old. He just loves flipping through and looking at the pictures of Masih Maud alayhi salam or Hazur doing his Khilafah duties. So just seeing that and knowing that it's not just about me, but about my son too, who's going to be enjoying these as he learns to read. So Jazakallah to Tariq bhai and the team at Review of Religions. We truly will be benefiting for many years from this.
Yeah, Faiq, Hazur gave a target for America that to get 1,000 subscribers in 3 months. So Tariq Sahib went, crazy for phoning every person.
I got the calls. I got the calls.
I think I had people in Europe say they got messages from Tariq Sahib.
Alhamdulillah, I got the phone call too. Amer bhai, trust me.
Is it possible to ask Salam Sahib, like he mentioned, reading the review, like what content he liked or didn't like, or I don't know what's his feedback on it from him and his son?
Oh yeah, Salam bhai. Yeah, go for it.
My son would say more pictures of Hazur, please. But yeah, I mean, there's no article that jumps out. I just enjoy different perspectives. Like Qaasid bhai was mentioning earlier, that these are battles like not against each other, but against illiteracy. And so I think the whole idea of being able to critically think from other people's perspectives are truly very important.
I have a quick anecdote about not having time to read. Like Hazur was mentioned to me, even Al-Hakam, they published an interview once. Hazur told me to read it. Sabas Sab, he has some excellent interviews or like sections where he mentions it. So about Abid Khan Sab's diary, Farhad Sab, is Farhad Sab still here?
I think so.
Yeah. So like Abid Sab's mentioned his diary. Like me and him are very close. Like when we both, like he's 1 year older than me. We kind of joined at the same time. We were the only 2 kind of British-born Vaks at the time. Non-missionaries, and so Hazur in the beginning would like train us together in a lot of things, and obviously I mentioned it's one of his recent diaries. Anyhow, Abid's diaries, when he started making a bit longer, so I thought, okay, I'll read it later. So I went to see Hazur, and he's like, "Have you read the latest diary?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "What are you doing?" I read it in 20 minutes. I read it in 20 minutes, Hazur said, and I make the notes, and I do everything, all the whatever I need to make, and then I give it back. So. And I've seen it sometimes on Hazur's desk. So then after Hazur said this, I decided that, okay, now I have to make it, when Abid sends it to me, I'm going to stop on the side of the road and just read it straight away in case Hazur asks me again. So next time he sent it, I did that. I stopped, I read it in half an hour, and I was very proud of myself. And so the next time I went to see Hazur, he said, "Have you read Abid's diary?" And I said, yes, Hazur, I read it in half an hour. I was, proud of myself. Hazur said, half an hour? You're the editor of View of Religions. I read it in 20 minutes. Why do you take half an hour to read it? So, I mean, just what Salam Saab was saying, I thought I didn't have time. They started to become longer. And then, when I realized Hazur himself is reading it, who's busier than him? So there's always time to read it.
Sometimes so true.
Great question and great insight, Salam. I really appreciate it. That was definitely great feedback. We have another participant here, Saud Iqbal. I believe you have your hand raised. You are able to unmute, I believe.
Assalamu alaikum.
Awesome.
Yeah, so great program. Jazakallah for everybody to come. I want to thank everybody, especially the Review of Religions and the Al-Fazl. And I was able. So basically, my question is, I'm able to subscribe to Al-Fazl. I'm able to subscribe to Review of Religions, and I'm able to subscribe to the other publications. But the one thing that I'm having issues with is Al-Hakam. So I was hoping that Imam Qaasid Sahib would be able to help me because every time I try to subscribe to it in paper, like I'm having a lot of issues because like they don't accept like online payments, they don't accept credit cards. So whenever when I correspond with the Al-Hakam team, they say, send over £12 or whatever. And I can't do that from America because, like I can't send like a money order or anything to a publication due to like whatever the restrictions they have. So is there any way that, or any update on how US subscriber can subscribe to Al-Hakam paper subscription?
Good practical question.
Yeah, right. Seriously. They don't accept USD, I guess.
I will look into it. It's one of those issues. We have a growing number of subscribers in USA, and unfortunately, at the moment, there are some teething issues with having payment available on the website because of the global scope of Al-Hakam. So you'd have to cater for all different countries. It's something we're looking into. I'm not sure. Maybe perhaps it's something maybe if you can email us the specific issues that you're facing. I know that there are a number, of people who have subscribed in print, and our print is being sent to USA, so it shouldn't be an issue in that respect. But if there's a specific issue, maybe perhaps your bank doesn't allow it, or I'm not sure. But I'll take it on board. Definitely, I'll discuss it with the team. It is something we ideally would want. Ease of payment. There are some issues, technical issues with that, which obviously that's a separate speech altogether.
Qaasid, do you have your email, by the way? If you can just put your whatever contact information, you can get in touch with you.
I did. I put it on the group.
The subscribe one?
Subscribe at alhakam.org.
Okay,
you can email us, and our team will be with you any time of the night and day. Inshallah, we'll be in touch.
Also, Qaasid, is it possible, so for example, for people who have family within the UK to subscribe for them? Is that a possibility that we have on the website? Okay.
Of course,
okay.
You can do that. That's That's
okay. Sometimes maybe a family member can subscribe for
Sure.
the other person, and then it's maybe easier for Al-Hakam people as well to deal with it.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Jazakallah.
That's good for the clarification. Appreciate that. I believe if anybody else is interested in speaking right now, I think you can raise your hand or try to unmute or provide a comment in the chat box, and we can unmute you as well. I don't see anybody actually. I'm not sure. Zaki, do you see anybody at the current moment? I think we have Hassan Jatala Sahib who has his hand raised. You can unmute.
Assalamu alaikum
Wa alaikum salam.
Jazakallah for this program. This is wonderful. One question I did have for Al-Hakam, Review of Religions, and like the whole crew is, so the way I consume my content is through podcast form and audio. Would Review of Religions or Al-Hakam, like the articles that you guys put up, they're wonderful, but they're lengthy. Would you guys ever consider putting up articles in like audio form, like a podcast form that you can just listen to on the go?
There was another person, by the way, also asking the question of, are we doing anything with audiobooks? So I just wanted to mention that.
I mean, in review, we've started doing it. I think if you can, because Tariq Malik is quite heavily in helping us, and we're on a lot of platforms. We do publish a lot of our articles in audio format, and I think we're on SoundCloud and Apple. But if it's possible to unmute Tariq Sahib, he's very familiar with it because he's, he can explain it in
Tariq Sahib, you can jump in.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have our articles online on SoundCloud. And we also have them on the Apple Store, on the podcast app. So I'm going to go ahead and share the SoundCloud link, which does have other interviews as well that the Review of Religions has conducted. So it's also a podcast, but then also audio articles, which are being taken care of by our team in Canada. So I'll go ahead and post that link for SoundCloud, which you should be able to access most of the content there in terms of podcast.
And Tariq, any particular chance you have any of the titles of most recent podcasts you guys published, just to give some of our audience an idea of like a glimpse of what those sound like, or what the topics might be covering? So
recently we did launch, as Amer Sahib mentioned, the new section, the Existence Project. And one of the videos, it's actually an hour-long podcast that we did, was published just last week, just almost over 10 days. On top of that, the articles are not just the most recent articles. We keep going back and forth in the different articles. They're relevant to the current, you can say, the hashtags on social media or current affairs. We get that article and we get it recorded, and it's like a process through which the articles are published and on the SoundCloud app. But I'm going to actually share the link right now. And in terms of anybody does have any other ideas in terms of how to increase or make this process even better, we're also looking for feedback. So I'm going to share an email as well. That is info@reviewofreligions.org. So always give us some feedback if you have any questions or comments on our articles, whether it is print, web, or audio articles. In terms of our website, I've shared that link as well. We have a plethora of articles there. I would like to very much welcome everybody to read the new article, which is an interview that Amer Sahib conducted of Hazur Anwar. And Hazur was, and it's a really important topic. It's about relationship with Allah Ta'ala. It's specifically about how Hazur worships Allah Ta'ala and his experiences. So this is something really unique, and I'll go ahead and share that link as well. And if there are any other questions, please do feel free to ask. Jazakallah.
Definitely.
Jazakallah. We'll put all these information as well under the video when we put it on the proper platform, right?
Right.
And all this information will be shared, rather is it concerning Al-Hakam or Review of Religion. But I think we can now bring this meeting to a close, because we have our UK friend as well who are it's starting becoming really late there.
8-hour difference from us, right? So it's still pretty early for us, and it's getting much later for them. And obviously we appreciate their time. Jazakallah for all three of you. Well, I should say all five of you for joining us. And inshallah ta'ala, we'd love to have you on again as well. If we would be honored to have the opportunity to have you as well. And inshallah ta'ala, we hope to gain, hopefully people gained a great deal from this program. And we will be doing another one very soon. Inshallah, we'll have some more information regarding that in the next couple of weeks. So please do keep us in your prayers. This is our first time doing this, and inshallah ta'ala we'll be able to continue
multiply
to do
this.
Multiply this. And I know that some people were having issues with we had a cap of 100 people from Zoom, but inshallah we'll try to
it was just to inform our UK friend and our US friends, it was a successful program, alhamdulillah. And we reached the cap. Unfortunately, we couldn't get more.
Fortunately or unfortunately, right?
Exactly. But inshallah we'll try to do our best next time as well. Inshallah.
Jazakallah, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.